Welcome everyone to our Up Pittsburgh event that we do every other month. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. We really appreciate it. It's nice to see some familiar faces too joining us. We are really excited about our discussion today. It is centered around how to talk to your kids about sex and all that means at any age. And we are so thrilled to have guests from Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania. They joined us on Friday at our all-staff meeting and really were able to share tons of resources that are available through Planned Parenthood right here in the greater Pittsburgh area. So it was really that alone, I didn't realize all the things that Planned Parenthood had available. So we're really thrilled to have them. Before I introduce Dany, I do want to say thank you to our Parent Up sponsor, NAMI of Western Pennsylvania. We really couldn't do this without them, and we appreciate their support year after year. So big thank you to them. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dany Ricci, who is the Education and Outreach Specialist for Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania, and they will introduce their colleagues. So Dany, welcome. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. So yeah, my name is Dany Ricci. I am Education Outreach Specialist at Planned Parenthood, and on my team we have CiArra Robinson, who is our drop-in center coordinator, and Dara Boucher, who is our temporary VP of Education and our peer education coordinator. Is that the correct term? Very happy to see everybody here today. Let me quickly share my screen so that y'all can see the presentation I prepared. Here we go. Everyone see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we're here today to talk about sex, everyone's favorite thing to talk about, and the reason that we are all here. Quick bio. Let me just mute everybody or minimize everybody so I can see what I'm reading. Just a little bit of background about us. CiArra, if you want to introduce yourself, you can too.
Hello, my name is CiArra Robinson. I work at the Drop-In Center down in Hazelwood. We offer a safe space for youth to come by and learn about reproductive health and sex education. And we also offer snacks and video games and just a place for them to, learn and be safe and have fun. I have been working with youth since the past 10 years now, which basically rolls into when I was a youth, but still. And yeah, I dabbled in some different fields of event planning and management as well, and leadership as well as military, but that's pretty much me.
As for me, I'm kind of a person of all trades. I've done all kinds of things, but the most relevant ones to this job are suicide prevention, crisis de-escalation, HIV prevention and treatment. I worked at an HIV clinic or STI clinic. I've worked at a youth homeless shelter. I've worked at a shelter for youth who were involved in the criminal justice system. So I've seen kind of a lot of stuff, and I'm pretty unfazed by taboo. I'm pretty good at talking about things people don't feel comfortable talking about. So speaking of which, today we're going to talk about your experiences with sex ed, if anyone feels comfortable sharing, age-appropriate sex ed topics by age group, some common myths, facts, and misunderstandings about sex and sex ed, resources for specialized sex ed topics such as LGBT or queer sex ed, sex for people with disabilities, etc. And the most important part, in my opinion, of the presentation is just talking about how to have these kinds of awkward conversations without it being so awkward. So before we start, some ground rules. We always have these whenever we do sex ed classes for kids, and we'll have them now. This is a safe space for all respectfully stated views and opinions. While medical information is hard to dispute, views and values on sex, relationships, and dating vary from culture to culture. We may not all agree on this, and that's okay. We can be respectful of each other's differences. There are no stupid questions. We've all had different experiences in life. Information will always be new to someone. I've known people who didn't know, I've known women who didn't know they had more than one hole until they were well into their teens. So, you know, we all start somewhere. And finally, no put downs. Even adults can have their emotions run high. Let's just be kind, civil, and patient with each other. Although I don't really see us getting into a yelling match over here, so I think we're all good here. Honestly, I'm genuinely curious where everybody else first learned about sex, like what your sex ed experience was. And I can go first to make it less awkward. I personally am 31 years old, and I was homeschooled. So I wasn't really exposed to sex ed, and my parents were very, very, let's say they sheltered me. And so I kind of didn't get the talk until I was 20, at which point I'd already had sex. So that was my sex ed experience. I did briefly attend high school and get sex ed there, but it was extremely sex negative and shameful. The teacher did the old lollipop thing where he pulled out a Tootsie Pop and was like, anyone want this? Then he unwrapped it and licked it and said, now does anyone want this? And then he made the comparison that is you if you have sex with someone before marriage. But hey, I want to hear from y'all.
I'll jump in. Is someone else talking, or is that just me?
No, it was me, but you can go ahead. I'll go after you.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say, I told our guests earlier, I'm 46 years old, so solidly kind of in Gen X. I did go to public school, and so our sex ed was in biology, I think 7th or 8th grade. We sort of had to watch this. I described it as a horrifying video. I stand by that. It was a miracle of life. Which it was like a National Geographic type thing. I don't know if it's still around, but it ended with a full-on birth. And I don't know, 8th grade, I did not need to see that. I don't have siblings, so it was very eye-opening. Yeah, and there wasn't as part of that sex ed, there wasn't really language or conversation around consent. There's certainly in the early 80s, there was not language or discussion around LGBTQ sex education. There wasn't, it was biology class. So it was really very much a biological lesson. And then that was sort of it. And so as I sort of half jokingly said, everything else that we learned, you know, from friends, we learned from, I think there was some after school specials, and whatever was happening on like Beverly Hills 90210. But that was it for me. I don't want to speak for a generation, but I think that's probably pretty similar if there's any other Gen Xers out there. There's someone else that was.
Oh, hold on. I think I said I was going to go next. I was trying to get my, I don't know if my video is showing, but that's what I was attempting to do. But yeah, I am 50 years old. No one taught me about sex at all. However, I learned about sex at an early age because I was a very early reader. I was reading like at, I think I read about sex way earlier than I should. And I've always regretted that. But I was just a very good reader. And believe it or not, I finished the children's section of the library and I moved over the teenage part. And it just so happened that I came to this section and they labeled it sex. I was like, okay. And that's when I just started reading about sex. So that was my thing about sex. No one taught me about it. And I started reading about sex like in the 2nd grade. So that was it. That was it for me.
I really appreciate that because it is true. Even now, like it's not just you. Kids, if you don't tell them about it, they will find out somehow. And nowadays it's not so much reading, it's the internet, it's TikTok, it's Instagram, it's but they'll see it somewhere. They'll read about it somewhere regardless. It's everywhere. It's in ads, it's in TV, it's in movies.
Yeah.
Did anyone else want to share, or shall I move to the next slide?
I can share. Oh, you go ahead and then I'll go.
I was just gonna say, so I feel like I knew about sex before I knew why people would want to do it. And I think that's probably the right order. And my mom told me, like, my mom was like, I don't, we lived in a city, and my mom was like, I don't want older kids to tell you about sex. I want me to be the one to tell you. So she told me very early, some would say maybe too early. So, I would be the one that people would come to and ask questions about stuff. And then, I don't know, do you want to share?
No, my mom read us the book. I don't remember how old I was. I was under the age of 8 because we were still in the house that I was like born in, but I don't know exactly how old, maybe 6 or 7. I don't know.
Yeah, there was like there was like a birds and bees book or something. And then like I had that Our Bodies Ourselves and stuff like that.
Thanks.
That is also true. Oh, what's that?
Go ahead.
I was just saying that's also true that I've also noticed that kids will hear about sex from other kids. And so it's good if, like you said, I couldn't see who was talking because I just can solely see my presentation right now. But whoever said that their parents taught them so that older kids, wouldn't teach them first. That's accurate. Older kids will teach you, and if your kid's well educated on it, they can give medically accurate information to other kids.
Absolutely. My experience was a little different. So my mom, I was always around a little bit of older children, and not that anybody was talking about it, but I just was like, Mom, how are babies made? And this was when I was in 3rd grade. And she was like, did Danielle tell you to ask me that? Like what? Like she thought one of like the older kids was maybe messing with her. And I was like, no, like I just was wondering. So she told me and was very accurate in like her, like in all of it, which was really nice in retrospect. And then we actually had, I don't know if anybody ever went to Wonders of Wonders, but that was in 5th grade. That was what we had to do. So we went to Wonders of Wonders and we saw this video, and they actually made us sit boy, girl, like in the chairs prior to watching it. So that was my experience.
Thank you everyone for sharing. Just after thinking about after hearing all this, let's just try and think about throughout this presentation what we would like our kids or potential kids sex ed experience to be like, and what we want them to take away from it and how we want it to be different from our own. So just out of curiosity, I'm gonna pull up the little window now to see everybody now. Okay. I'm just going to ask a series of questions that a child might ask, and you're going to react whether you feel comfortable answering this question. There's no wrong answer. I just want to see where y'all are. If you all have cameras, we can do the old thumbs up. But if not, you can just send the little what's it called? The little emoji thing. If anyone knows how to do that, I don't know. It's all good. Everyone, what if your kid asked you, where do babies come from? Do you feel ready for that question? Why does my penis get hard and stick up sometimes? You feel good about that? Yeah. How do you know if you're in love with someone? That's a tough one even for an adult, to be fair. I'm like, what does rape mean? Feel comfortable explaining that? What is non-binary? Good on that. My friend says boys can't wear dresses, but I like dresses. What should I do? Okay, so everyone's feeling pretty good about gender. What is sex like? What is a normal penis size? All right, is masturbation okay? How do you know if you're pregnant? To be fair, if my kid asked me that, I would start freaking out immediately. But but that said, we may not necessarily go over the answers to all of these questions today, but I will definitely go over resources where you can get said answers. Because if I was to give a complete comprehensive sex ed lesson, it would take probably a couple different classes like we do in school. So bonus real life question that a kid asked me just earlier this year. I saw 3 people all making out on a show my older sister was watching. Is that wrong? All right, people feeling pretty good about this. All right, that's good to know. That's comforting to know. So I'm going to organize this by age group, and the resource I'm building it off of, which you can see here, is Talk with Your Kids. I have the link down there, but so age 0 to 2. When you're talking to small kids, it doesn't really go as into the description of sex or anything. It's more just sex ed means talking about body parts and private time. So just knowing what your body parts are called, stating clear boundary as to who can touch the bathing suit parts, only the doctor or your parent or whatever it may be, and other people may not touch those parts. At this age, it's very common for children to start exploring their genitals. Sometimes new parents get freaked out by that. Is my baby masturbating? It's not exactly. It just feels good, and so a child will touch it. That's natural. Just when they do that, I would emphasize not to shame them, but just say, oh, that's something you have to do in private. You don't do that in front of other people. And use correct terms to refer to body parts, if only just for clarity. For example, worst case scenario, if you had to clarify whether, where somebody touched your kid, it helps to have correct terms so you know what's going on and you don't misunderstand a situation. Age 3 to 5 tends to be the age kids do the where babies come from, et cetera, et cetera. You just want to make sure the kid knows they can ask you any questions they have. Teach them about inappropriate touch and how to say no to unwanted touch. For some kids, or for some families, this also extends to families. For example, like, even if it's not a sexual thing, it's just if a kid doesn't want to be touched, let them know it's okay to have bodily autonomy and say, I don't feel like, hugging grandma or whatever it may be. Just so they know that if an adult asks to touch them and they don't want it, they can say no. Be ready to give a simple description of where babies come from. You need 2 parts to make a baby. Obviously, I'm a non-binary person, so the whole man-woman thing can be confusing, but when we're talking real basic 3-year-old biology, you're just saying you need 1 part an egg and 1 part a sperm. When they get combined in a special place in the belly, it grows into a baby, which comes out from between the legs. If you want, you can get rid of the whole man-woman language and just say an egg and a sperm, but that can be confusing. So you use at your own discretion, but in general, just a real basic biological explanation of how a cell from this person meets a cell from this person and makes a new person. Then when they get a little older, you can start getting a lot of questions. Be prepared to answer more mature questions about reproduction, and reinforce the importance of open communication in your family. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later when we get into tips about communication, etc. But a lot of things, a lot of the the impact that comes from answering these questions comes from how you answer them. So even if something might take you aback when a kid asks you something, taking it in stride and acting like it's not a big deal sort of sends the message, oh, it's okay to ask questions and we can talk about anything here. If you want, you can give them books about anatomy or puberty so they can explore them on their own rather than you forcing them like, here, we need to learn about this. Just amongst their books that they can have ones that explain, what the general basics of anatomy, puberty, etc. That's something that we also have recommendations for on our website. I believe I have the link at the end of the slideshow. And this is important promote healthy body image, especially when talking about yourself. Some things, for example, that I internalized from my childhood. Whenever my mom got above 130 pounds, she would stop eating and she would talk about how she needed to be 130 pounds. And that's something that maybe she didn't say anything about me necessarily in that moment, but that's a message I internalized. And it's stuff like that. Remember that the message you send about yourself are the messages you're sending to your kid. So promoting healthy body image, loving yourself, taking care of yourself, it's great. Consider the way you talk about your own body and consider what you're complimenting in your child. There's also certain sexist or unintentionally, gendered compliments that where sometimes people will feel more inclined to call little girl pretty and et cetera, et cetera. Remember to compliment things that aren't just their body. Compliment your kids' intelligence, their smile, their laugh, their jokes, their talent, et cetera, et cetera. Remind your kid that they're more than just their body. Then, of course, everything goes crazy. About between 9 and 12, everyone's puberty hits at a different time. So some kids are later bloomers, some are earlier. And it's emphasized that all bodies develop differently and at their own pace. There may be a lot of comparison of like, why does my friend have boobs and I don't, or vice versa. Or I had a kid who put an anonymous question into our question box at the end of one of our sex ed lessons. That was like, my body is curvy, and so my mom says the clothes I wear are inappropriate, but it's just my body. Stuff like that. So these kind of questions do come up a lot. And so, keep an eye out for them and remind them that everyone's bodies are different. Some people will be more curvy, some people will not. Everyone develops at their own pace. Some people will get their growth spurt immediately, others way later. If masturbation comes up, which it certainly will around that age or often will, remind them that it's natural and healthy, should be done privately. Obviously, your mileage may vary. Some households, depending upon religion, etc., may or may not be okay with it. So that's whatever, that's fine. It's more that I'm just saying on a medical level, it's not harmful. And some might say it helps a person know their body better. You can also share personal experiences from your life when we're talking about relationships or puberty, or use examples from media to discuss what healthy relationships look and feel like. If your kid may start having questions about dating or having crushes, etc., it's good to model these things and have these conversations just casually whenever they come up. Like if you're watching a TV show together and there's two characters in a relationship, like you can talk about that. It may also come time to discuss your family's expectations and values about dating and sexual activity. This, once again, I can't tell you what to do here because some people, they want their kids can't date until they're 13, others 16, others, it may be, some people may be more like, it's okay if you date, but if you have sex, but not when you're an adult, not when you're under my house, whatever it may be. I'm not here to make your family's rules, but whatever the rules are, it's time for them to start happening. And you can think about that in time, what you think is okay, what you think is not okay. And that makes, but it's good to have these kind of conversations and involve the kid so it doesn't feel like you're just putting rules down on them. And then you can have a conversation about, what they would want their dating life to be like and what rules that might imply at home. By the way, side note, if your kid is transgender, the start of puberty can be a very hard time for them. Be gentle. Speaking as a transgender person, it's just that's when all the changes start happening that differentiate sexes. And so, if the sex that your child is developing into is not one they feel comfortable in, this can be a really difficult time. So, that's something that if they bring that up with you, honor the fact that they shared that with you, and you can work on ways to make this easier for them. I will make a side note that we do offer hormone therapy at Planned Parenthood. Not that a child would be given hormone therapy at that age. The term is puberty blockers. So it's rather than going through a puberty, they would delay it until they could decide how they felt about their gender or come to a conclusion and choose a decision of what path they wanted to go on. Quick sidebar about puberty, menstruation. It will happen. A lot of kids who start their periods might feel uncomfortable and self-conscious about it. And there is a lot of stigma in our society about how periods are gross, disgusting, dirty, etc. I don't expect any of y'all to be in that crowd, but just be aware that that's something that kids will say and it will float around. So make sure to dismantle that stigma when you come about it. There's also a lot of stigma about PMS, where people who experience periods, their valid emotions are invalidated because, oh, you're just hormonal and blah, blah, blah. So these aren't things that are anything you need to necessarily talk about, but it's something to keep in mind so you don't perpetuate that kind of stigma. And be mindful of the words you use when you talk about menstruation. I also added a link to our Planned Parenthood period tracker app. But there's also non-app options if you're concerned about privacy, because who knows what our phones are monitoring. So I found this classic period tracker online, which can be really helpful, especially at the beginning of puberty, because at the beginning periods aren't always super consistent. So that way you can keep track of the different symptoms you're going through, and you know, and what day of your cycle it may be. And then you can also document illness, activity level, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, very nice. And then we have a yearly one too. Average cycle length, average period length. You can just figure out these things about yourself. So, yeah. And then when we get 13 to 18, the home stretch of being a parent, talk about the benefits of delaying sexual activity. Now, I'm not honestly, I'm not one of those people who's like, abstinence, you can't have sex, but delaying sexual activity until you know what you're doing, until you can make sure that you feel safe and confident in your choices, etc., can be helpful. Reminding the kids that they can always wait to have sex, but that doesn't mean that sex isn't a pleasurable, great activity that two people can share, but it's something that you have to do responsibly, because if you do it incorrectly, there can be consequences like diseases or infections or pregnancy. So, you know, talk to them about that frankly. If they can sense your honesty, if they feel you're being real with them, they'll be more likely to listen. Discuss birth control and STD prevention to help them avoid risky sexual behavior. Reinforce that healthy relationships are built on trust and equal power. Ensure that they know how to say no. Once again, hopefully with a great foundation, this won't even be a problem. But it's always good to remind them, because it's easy to say when you're thinking, oh, a rapist is going to jump out of me, jump out of the bushes at me. But it's harder when it's somebody that you actually love and care about who's crossing your boundaries. So make sure that you have that conversation about consent, about what's okay, what's not okay. Explain what mutual consent means and why it's important. And share where they can access sexual and reproductive health care services. By the way, small shout out to ourselves. They are free at Planned Parenthood if you're under 21 without insurance. So, or under 21, you say you don't have insurance, but that's a whole other story. Some common myths and misconceptions. CiArra, if you wanted to, is this where you wanted to take over, or shall I just?
It doesn't matter. Hello, everyone. Just some common misconceptions and myths. You can tell by looking if someone has an infection, very highly false. Just like it's good to be cognizant and aware of different things such as smell, appearances, if something's a little off. And we say that with a grain of salt because, like we say, everything looks and is different for everybody. But if it has something that is of concern, like, maybe a copper or a cheesy smell or something like that, you obviously want to take note of that, because something that might not be normal for you might be normal for somebody else. But many STIs can be asymptomatic and not show any symptoms at all. So that is false as far as the common myth goes. Condoms prevent all STIs. Infections that are transmitted by skin-to-skin contact. With that in mind, they can still be transmitted while using a condom. So it's important for both partners to get tested. And we always advise our youth as well, you know, anytime you get a new partner, you should definitely be getting tested, because I mean, that's how STIs happen. It's like they have to be introduced by one of the two parties, or one of how many ever parties you're involving in that act. Oral sex is safe sex. False. Even though it's quite unlikely to catch HIV through oral sex, it is still quite common for chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis to be transmitted orally. We're always passing out, we have flavored condoms as well at our center. And we, like, when we are talking to youth, we always advertise those as well. I mean,
And dental dams.
And dental dams. HIV can be transmitted through any bodily fluid. False. Only blood, vaginal fluid, semen, pre-ejaculation, rectal fluids, and breast milk. Kissing, shaking hands, sharing foods with a person living with HIV will not transmit the virus. There's actually a lot of different films that I feel as though give false information and lead to these kind of myths and misconceptions. So that's definitely one to note for sure, and to talk to your kids about for sure. Talking openly about sex, drugs, suicide, etc., can put the idea in the kid's head and lead them to do those things. As we all know, very, very false. You know, we live in a very media representative culture for sure, and I feel as though like they're going to find it regardless. Most of our youth will definitely tell us that they started learning about sex long before we, you know, got introduced in class, or before they start taking health class. And I feel as though it's very important. If, you know, they're going to learn, they learn it from a trusted adult and a trusted resource. And that would be us or you all after, you know, receiving information and whatnot. And even in class, but definitely they're going to find the information if they'd like to or not. And sometimes it's not very accurate or honest. Moving on to the next slide, sorry.
Oh yeah, so a quick and dirty, or quick and clean, I don't know, sex isn't dirty. A quick introduction to gender and sexuality for anybody uninitiated. It seems like everybody seems pretty confident with these things, so I'm gonna go real quick because I noticed a lot of thumbs up when talking about it. But the more kids bring it up, it can get confusing. So, especially now, the younger generations are really into micro labels, the whole Gen Z, like they have to really label their sexuality extremely specifically, which is great, but can be confusing for us old heads. So, sex, the way your body is set up, chromosomes, genitals, etc. Gender, how you feel inside, whether that be male, female, both, neither, something else. Cisgender means your sex matches your gender. So let's say you have a penis and you feel you're a man, you're cisgender. Transgender, your sex does not match your gender. So let's say you're assigned male at birth, but you feel female. Transgender. And then of course somehow I don't know why I forgot this, because I myself am non-binary, but non-binary means you don't fit into either of the binary categories, male or female. Presentation is how you like to dress or present yourself. Clothing, makeup, jewelry, hairstyles. That can be completely independent of gender and sexuality. So, you know, you could be a man and like to wear a dress and not be transgender. You might just like wearing dresses. Or similarly, you could be a woman who likes wearing quote unquote men's clothes, but still identify as a woman. Presentation doesn't necessarily mean that you're transgender. It's just, your presentation is just your style, how you like to be. And finally, independent of all these things is sexuality. Who are you attracted to? Who you identify as is not necessarily correlated to who you're attracted to. How you feel about yourself and how you feel about other people is different. So we have the classic homosexual, attracted to the same sex. Heterosexual, opposite sex. Bisexual, two sexes. Pansexual, attraction is unrelated to sex or gender. You just fall for a person and you like that person. All of these are different for everyone and may not be related to each other. In particular, sexuality is not the same thing as gender. Who you are attracted to is unrelated often with how you feel about yourself or who you are. I've linked some more resources because this could be a whole 1 hour presentation on its own. But the ones I like are the Pittsburgh Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gay Children or People. And that has got resources here, support groups, facts about LGBT youth, questions parents ask, Trans 101 for parents, frequently asked questions, etc., etc. And then I also like the LGBT hotline, small self shout out because I also volunteer here, but that's a whole other story. But we have a really big glossary of all these little terms. Dead name, so a trans person's previous name. Demi boy, someone who only partially identifies as a boy, and all these other more specific ones that I don't have time to go into. So if you're ever curious and would like to learn a little more about this stuff, there you go. I will also make a quick tangent because I do know that Every Child was originally created for youth with severe medical problems, but this may conditions, but extended to all youth. So I wanted to add that there's a side note about youth with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It's not as different as you might think. A lot of people, there's a lot of myths about people with disabilities, which is that, for example, they're asexual. They don't have sex. They can't have relationships. They can't get married or have children. They need to be protected. Anyone who is having sex with someone who has a disability must be taking advantage of them. These are all incorrect. Adults with disabilities can have fulfilling lives, love, and even sexual pleasure. So I don't have time to go into a full lesson about this, but I wanted to share some resources. So I have some more links here. This one is a playlist, and it's by people who have disabilities. So it's not just, talking at them. It's sex ed for people with disabilities by people with disabilities. So it's very affirming. We also have free sex ed lesson plans for families. We found this on the internet and from the Seattle and King County Public Health Department. Thank you, Seattle. But they have a full course of education, of special ed, sex ed. So if that's something anyone's interested in, it's all out there for you. They also have homework to do with those lessons plans. So for example, you might have, activities, asking for what you want, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have time to go into all of this, but I just wanted you to know that there's so many free resources on the internet, if you weren't aware. So, CiArra, did you want to take over or should I just roll with it?
Fun. Can you press it? Sorry. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Rather than one overwhelming sex talk, try to keep it casual, conversation ongoing throughout the years. As you guys might be able to tell, we have a lot. Overall, we ourselves go to schools like once a month. We have some educators that go every single week. It's a lot of material because sex is like encompassing a lot of things in general. So you want to make sure you're not trying to like just dump all of that onto their plates in one go, because then they'll be like, oh, yikes, this is very uncomfortable. And, it's just a lot of information to intake, and you want them to be able to come to you as they learn new things or get new perspectives as well. So we like to try to keep it, casual and not so heavy on the meat is what I like to call it, because a lot of meat. Check in with them regularly. Like I said, I mean, even a lot of the times I'll see, because I've been working with youth for a very long time. And as you all might even be able to tell from your own personal experiences and whatnot, the person you were 5 years ago is not the person that you're going to be 5 years from now. Obviously, teenage years are definitely the most like impressionable and like the most molding to maybe, depict who they might want to be and who they are becoming. And, a lot of that's either media based or it's from, you know, the models and role models that they have around them. So a lot of them might just be finding a lot of information out through their peers, and just overall, I'm sure if you have children or familiar with TikTok, a lot of them try to just reference those materials with relationship questions and sex questions. Once they're older, ask them about crushes or dating or relationships. Ask them how they think they'll know when they're ready to have sex, including the responsibilities that come with it, like preventing unintended pregnancies and STDs. That one's super important because I feel as though, you know, I'm just speaking from my own personal experiences and what I see it when we are talking to youth. Obviously, it's very exciting that, you know, they've gotten to a point where they're able to have emotional bonds and connections and figure out what they like and who they don't like, and all this and all that. And like having a crush can be very exciting, overwhelming, stressful as well. And I think it's important to try to hone in and remember there's a lot of emotions and there's a lot of logic when it comes to dating. Like one of the things that we talk about heavily when we talk about our relationships and healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships and abusive relationships courses, we talk about values, and we talk about, okay, so what is something that you yourself believe in or really appreciate and value that your friends also do, or the person that you're talking to. We had like a group session last week actually with a bunch of youth, and it's just very interesting to see how many of them think in different perspectives. One of the classes talked about like, okay, so if we're gonna go on a date, is it expected that this person always pays? Or is it expected that I pay and you tip? Or maybe we'll take turns and whatnot. Just making sure that you're having those kind of conversations with them so they can start to really create the foundation of, I believe this, and this is what I really want in this kind of relationships when I go and venture out into them. And also obviously talking about the different things with the types of contraceptions as well. And we're always a great resource. We have a bunch of great resources on our websites, like CiArra, that gives them the different comparisons between the types of contraceptions and whatnot. And remember, it's okay if you feel a little awkward or if you or your kid gets embarrassed. One of the things on our group agreements that we always say in the beginning of each class, it's okay to get uncomfy, because this isn't a conversation that you just have every single day, or maybe especially for first time teen parenting kind of conversation. It's like, well, now we're getting to the fun stuff in life, and yikes. But we never want to make anybody feel embarrassed, and that's not the intention between, I'm sure, you guys' conversations with your children as well. And it'll be worth it for you, and it'll be worth it for them, because then you could be a safe space for your children as well. I was just literally talking to my mom this morning. It's interesting that I'm obviously not but I'm not a parent, but my mom is a parent, obviously. And you don't really raise kids, you raise young adults. Like, yeah, that's cute and, you know, everything until they hit a certain age. Like I was cute until I hit 8, and then, whoa. So yeah, and you know, they're gonna go about their lives and make the decisions for themselves. And the best thing you can do as a parent or a trusted adult is set them up with the correct, right resources, and make it a safe space for them to go to, so they can have that open line of communication with you if they come into trouble or come into curiosity. So yeah, and it becomes easier. Like it definitely does become easier as they get more informed and they get older as well.
I will also add that like sometimes it seems like, at least for me in my personal experience of parents, they felt like the only reason things like dating or relationships came up were almost as a judgment of like, are you dating people? Are you seeing people? And so it seems like a negative thing. And like if you show interest and a positive interest in your kid's dating life or their growth, even though it's scary to see your child growing into an adult and maybe making mistakes or getting their heart broken, it's important to show interest and care about those things, because then they'll come to you when they do have problems, even, you know.
makes you more relatable too. I can't think of a time that I wanted to ask advice about, like, I use the comparison. I wouldn't go to a plumber to ask them about, like, you know, engineering questions. Like, if I can't relate or think that your understanding of the topic at hand, then I probably won't ask you very much, because you haven't shown me that you know very much about it, or that, you know, that you can at least understand that this is where I'm at with trying to understand the world. And if you're going to give me the, oh, well, you'll learn about it in class mantra, then it's just like, okay, well, now I guess I'll just go learn it about it either in class or from a different resource. So common tips and techniques. Don't judge, can't talk. Don't jump to conclusions about why they're asking and what, why they're asking what they're asking. You can say, can you tell me what you already know about that, or what have you heard about that? I think it's important to try to not make your own storylines of how did we get to this point of you asking me about oral sex, because at the end of the day, if you're making it a safe space, they'll tell you. And if you're making it a place where they can, you know, really genuinely get information and feel like heard, then you'll be setting the ground for all the future conversations to come. Practice your poker face. Sometimes you'll get questions or you'll get things that, you know, will be a little either off the wall or like you weren't expecting. We have a lot of kids that troll us at school on a daily basis, and what we do in those kind of situations, we still give them very accurate medical information, and we do it in a sense where, like, we're not making them feel like dumb, quote unquote, or making them feel like, oh, we're giving in and haha, you fooled us. Because then they usually follow up with like a legit question too. But yeah, the main concept for this one is that, like, you know, a lot of people can, especially children, I feel like, and youth these days are very visual learners and very attentive. So if you're giving off that you're showing either shame or you're grossed out by something, or that you're like, then they're just gonna, okay, well, bet I'm not gonna bring that up again, never mind, because I don't feel like I can, you know, speak openly. After giving an answer, keep the conversation open. So like a lot of follow-up questions. I won't say to a point that it's nagging, but definitely to a point where it's just like, you know, what other questions might you have? Or, you know, is there anything else that, you know, is making you bring this up? What's going on with you? You know, and just making it like I've been saying, a safe space. I don't like to talk at kids. I like to talk to, because there's a complete difference in the delivery and the tone, and they receive it completely differently. Check with their understanding. After answering a question, you can ask, like, does that answer your question? What do you think about that? Is there anything else that you're curious about? Like, overall, they're going to have follow-up questions. It might not be in that very second, but it can be even on a different subject. And, you know, it can lead to more conversations and more openness. If you don't know the answer to something, you can always look it up on your own or together. Find it's really helpful. You know, I'll be the first to admit when I don't know something, especially when it comes with kids, because I feel as though I had this conversation, actually, I'm Muslim. So I had an experience with another friend of mine who we were going back and forth about people who had both genitalia and whatnot. And for me, I will be the first to say, I don't know, so I'm gonna look it up. And then he was very adamant about, like, creating an answer off the top of his head when he had never even heard of of a person that might have both in the first place. And I was just like, that's very wrong. And I feel like you're informing people of very wrong things if you don't really look up the answers, because there's always going to be, it might not be something that's 100% accurate, but there's definitely a lot of research on a lot of things. And like I said, we have a lot of resources on our site, and it just makes for a better learning experience for you and the youth as well, because
Ah.
it's like, oh, well, I guess they don't know everything either. So that's good.
I think it also like helps model like how to react to things that are unfamiliar to you when it's not. I always have to be right. I'm the parent. I know everything. Be showing a human side where I don't know everything and I'm just like you. Let's figure it out together. Let's just, and you can show them how to look up information accurately too, and say, oh no, that's a bad site. You shouldn't look in this. This is a like like the CDC website. You should check here or whatever it may be. So yeah, that was the majority of what we wanted to talk about. So, we're here for questions, like since it's only been, just a solid little hour. So some information about us, you can get book sexual wellness appointments through our website right here. Planned Parenthood does offer pretty much everything related to your reproductive health. So that may be ultrasounds, that may be infertility treatments, that may be erectile dysfunction appointments, that may be testing for UTIs or yeast infections, or pap smears, breast exams. So, get in touch with us. We also have a youth drop-in center in Hazelwood, 5125 2nd Avenue. We're open Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 2 to 6 p.m. That's if we're not teaching, because sometimes we are teaching in, the high schools in the area. At our drop-in center, we have free educational events, workshops, menstrual and safe sex supplies. So, pads, tampons, condoms, dental dams, let's see, what else? Lube, Plan B, pregnancy tests, a little bit of everything. Our next event will be November 28th, actually. We're having a little men's health event, talking man to man about
November
men's health.
30th.
Oh, November 30th, sorry. I forgot to change we changed the date, but I forgot to change it on here. Talking about heads, hearts, other parts, a workshop for fathers, brothers, sons, and the people who love them, in honor of November, Men's Health Month. We'll be offering free burgers, and we'll be having somebody from the Department of Health to come talk about youth mental health. So that's what we're up to. And finally, here's all those resources. So I'm definitely going to send all these links to every child so that they can distribute amongst everybody. But some of our favorite resources for sex ed, I like Bedsider. This is a website that talks a lot about birth control and sexual health and wellness. So one of my favorite things here is they have a birth control comparison chart. So you can compare different kinds based on certain categories. So for example, if I was like, let me compare an IUD with the pill. Let's see, where's the pill? The pill. Effectiveness. The IUD is one of the most effective. Pill is really effective and taken perfectly, but most don't take it perfectly. And so on and so forth. Side effects, blah, blah, blah. I love this website. It's got a lot of information. Another one would be Scarletine. This one's more targeted towards youth, but you can use this as well. It's a sex ed website that has a lot of information, and my favorite thing is the advice section. So students or kids can ask questions, and sex educators will answer. They also have message boards. So there's got a lot of information on here. Amaze.org has a lot of really cute videos about sex ed, and they have resources for parents, how to talk to their kids about sex, how to be an askable parent. They have videos about everything from, sex to gender, internet safety, all kinds of things. They have resources for talking about porn, how to talk to your kid about how those things aren't real and can be toxic in some ways, so you need to be careful. And of course, there's us. And this is where I was talking about the different books and stuff that we recommend. We have a lot of resources based on age group on our website, so where you can read about the different information based, for example, elementary school, how to talk to an elementary school age child about sexuality, etc. So, you know, even though we can't cover every single little detail in this one talk, I just wanted to share all these things, these resources, so you can look up more information at your discretion. Locally, I really recommend PFLAG Pittsburgh for LGBTQ gender and sexuality information, and the PGH Equality Center. I also love Hugh Lane, which I forgot to put on here. And for resources about consent and healthy relationships, a great place to start would be RAIN. They have a lot of articles about what consent looks like and about sexual violence, etc. And then Love is Respect, which has a lot of information about healthy relationships and abuse. And that can be a great resource for finding information about creating a safety plan, power and control, setting boundaries, etc., warning signs of abuse. So yeah, if y'all have questions, we're all happy to answer them.
Well, as a reminder, this will be up on our YouTube channel shortly, hopefully this week. And so if you need to go back and check anything that was said, please feel free to do that. We will also share the resources or have the resources available for those of you who we have a lot of foster parents on here today. If you want some of those resources or want the handouts, just email Jamie or I, and we can send those out to you when we get those as well. But thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Dany and CiArra, thank you so much for being here and taking your time on a Monday evening. This was really, really helpful. And thanks, as always, to our sponsor, NAMI, for supporting our Parent Up program. We will have another one in January, so keep an eye out for that. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.